Former prison inmates, what do Hollywood movies often get wrong about prison life? Quoting a friend who did 3 months for drunken car theft. It was pretty chill. Woke up at 6 in the morning. Personal hygiene. Then chill if you will in common area until 8. If you sign up for work, you spend 6 hours a day with the crew in the woods cutting down trees in future construction zones. The pay is more than decent. If you do studies instead, you are compensated financially. If you pass classes, even more so. Best case, you have done one mistake in your life, and you leave prison a better person than when you entered. And you should have a range of skills needed to enter the private sector. It should definitely be said though, that I am Norwegian, and we have the money to spend on proper prisoner treatment. The sheer monotony. Boredom. Same stuff. Day in, day out. That doesn't make for an enticing film. I work in the prison system. I'm a maintenance foreman. I oversee a work crew of a handful of offenders. So I spend a lot of time in a prison. First, most prisons aren't maximum security. The cell life you generally see in newer movies isn't reality. Most prisons have what they call a dorm, which is more like what you see in movies from the 70s. Lots of bunks. Very close together. Inmates have a tote with a combination lock permanently affixed to it for storing their commissary and personal effects. When they are away from their bunk, the tote goes on it. When they are in them, they go at their feet. Second, inmates don't just wander freely all day if they're not on a work crew. They are limited to their dorm area, which includes a day room with small tables they can play cards on, watch TV, whatever. Chow, recreation, etc. are kept on strict schedules. Rec is an hour where they can play basketball, softball, play pool, yes, with sticks and real pool gonads. And also yes, we think it's a bad idea. Although offenders generally don't duck with that stuff lest they lose it. Chow is not 3 hot meals a day. It's 1 to 3 hots a day. Breakfast is sometimes hot, sometimes not. Lunch is almost never hot. It's always a sack with 4 pieces of bread, a piece of prison meat, bologna, salami, ham, or turkey, a dollop of peanut butter with jelly blended in already, and a cookie. Side note, maintenance workers are supposed to get double meat, but usually it just ends up with us getting them 2 sacks. They usually double up their 2 sandwiches, eat the cookies and make toast with the extra bread to use for some commissary meal later. During holiday weekends, the Friday before, the offenders will get 3 hot meals. During the weekend, however, they will get cold meals all weekend. The worst part about prison was the dementors. So I was never in prison, but my major centered around it and talked to a lot of people. IDK about short-term people. But I spoke with lifers a few times. They talked about monotony, and after a while it just becomes life. The craziest part was the disconnect. Like one guy I spoke to said he used to live on this one block in North Philly. It had been leveled and is now a field. His best friend lived 3 blocks away. I knew exactly which house he was talking about because my friend lives in the one next door. But the way he spoke about it was crazy because almost none is the same. Maybe because it's a city. Maybe because gentrification. But he had been in prison since he was 17. He's 67 now. If he was ever released, I doubt he'd know where he was even if you dropped him right in front of where his house used to be. There are 2 types of people in jail, those who leave and never come back, and those who spend the rest of their life coming back. It's a huge effect that has to do with financial instabilities. See, when you're out on the street, you have nothing. You go to prison, and you have free food, housing, etc. So what do the financially unstable, especially homeless, as I've heard, do? Starve on the streets or get free housing, food, etc. I'm all for good prisons, but it's certainly interesting. I wish there was some sort of financial support for when you leave prison. It's really not so bad. I spent a couple years in medium security prison and not once in my 2 years less a day sentence did I get propositioned for gay sex. Forced or otherwise. I had my own private room. There wasn't a lock on the door to my cell. And at no time did I have a conflict with a guard that I didn't deserve. For the first 6 months I had to wear a uniform. Then after then I was allowed to wear regular clothes. After a year I worked at the local cemetery. Took the bus back and forth from work to the prison. Most days involved getting up at 6 AM. Cleaning the common areas. Then off to breakfast. Classes. Then lunch. Afternoons alternated between diving, swimming, trampoline, running, rowing practice and art shop mechanics programs. Here's one thing that I think Hollywood always gets wrong about prisons. The food. The food in prison was fantastic. I put on 20 pounds while I was there. And it wasn't all muscle. Breakfast was usually eggs and toast. Bacon etc. Lunch was pizza or similar. And dinner would be lasagna type meals. By the time I left, I was sick of rice pudding, but it was good rice pudding. Over the 2 years, I spent about a total of 10 days in solitary for various infractions. But even that wasn't a big deal. When they sent you to solitary you had to leave everything behind, but the room was like a regular cell with a bed, windows, books. Basically it was a cell with a lock on the door that you were sent to think. I'm sure it's completely different in the US, but in Canada, honestly, my dorm at university was rougher, more troublesome. My favorite uncle was in and out with a bit of frequency. He was a good dude, but made some stupid choices. And he seemed to almost sort of like it. He said he spent most of his time playing cards for our men noodle packs. For him, that would have been a good time. He mostly just wanted people to like him. I have some years in prison and jail. The great thing does not really happen so much. There are so many willing inmates, there is no need. When you go to prison in Michigan, everyone goes through quarantine, which is where they classify your security level. It's an old walled prison, very similar to how Shawshank Redemption is set up. What do you know about cold water? I've got an old friend in there now. Always kinda wonder what his life there is like. Never been to cold water but have not heard bad things about it. The worst is cotton. It's hell. 2-year survivor of a women's prison. The thing that TV leaves out about women's prison is how many items have actually been in someone's vag. Can't smoke. Cigarettes and lighter in vag. Drug addict. Vag drew Gus. Loan sharking and don't want your cash taken by the COs. Vag money. The list goes on and on. In Canada inmates work as well. Often 5 days a week. The relationship between the inmates and the guards is usually a lot more friendly than the media depicts. In Canada, prisoners sometimes emulate the characters in prison movies, which is bad. It's more like a daycare. The biggest pain in your ass is the asshole officer. Basically I spent my time in the mental unit. All we did was trade pills and watch TV. We had someone that screwed a bunch of people over, but before prison justice could be enacted he got caught with 30 shivs and got sent out. But mostly it was sharing commissary to make group meals and trading pills for commissary or for whatever medicine you prefer. What strikes me the most, Hollywood mixes jail and prison stereotypes. As much as both are featured in Hollywood productions, most folks don't know the difference between the two. That's really sad to me, considering the huge proportion of American citizens doing time in one or the other. What is the difference? Jails are for short-term stays and typically for those guilty of misdemeanors, while prisons are for longer stays and felons. I know someone in this subreddit will know what I'm talking about when I say that you have to go and watch the After Prison show by Joe Guerrero. His YouTube channel sort of grew pretty rapidly and he has been looking for inmates that were released to help. He finds this guy Danny who was locked up in federal prison for 40 years. He was put in solitary confinement for like almost 10 years. His mental health was down and there's actually a video of a real life cell extraction. I would most definitely rather go to prison in a third world country than a federal max security prison here in the States, and you will see why if you watch that video. I work in a prison. It all depends on the state you're in. They are all very different from each other. A lot of inmates are scared. Gangs are a pain in the ass. And most, all, struggle to accept responsibility for why they are there and to regulate their emotions. Some are funny and tell great stories. My brother was in prison when in his 20s. They have very little time to eat. Like 5-10 minutes once they get food. He would wait in line for an hour in single digits weather in the winter. Triple digit in the summer. I visited once and his hands were chapped from the cold. We were able to get him some gloves after I noticed his hands and asked, but he never told us because he didn't want us to worry. My brother served time. It's not so much scary as much as it is boring. My dad knows someone who did time in a British prison for white collar stuff. He said the same thing. Apparently nobody cares about white collar criminals and he was basically left alone for his entire sentence. You only got trouble if you deliberately went looking for it. There was the odd violence. Broken up quickly by the staff. It's not like white collar types were being constantly beaten up and having their stuff taken. I did an extremely short stint in Maine for DUI. What struck me was just how casual and downright friendly the COs were. Granted, Maine. So it was a facility under capacity and not exactly full of hardened criminals. Mostly just dumb ducks like I was who pulled some stupid stunt and were just waiting to get back to their lives afterwards. That prison is terrifying and full of hardened, psychotic criminals. It's actually mostly the high-functioning developmentally disabled, the mentally ill, schizophrenia, PTSD, and old men without health insurance or social security that needed shelter and medical attention. It's more like depressing. I did 3 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and have been out just 3 months so far. First off, people always confuse jail with prison. If you do less than 2 years you'll be in county or state jail. Also, because of the threat of write-ups and the creation of transfer units, like Gaza East and West, it's not nearly as violent as in the movies. Food's good. Everyone is assigned a job. Unless you're really ducking up or being a crash test dummy, no one will really duck with you. Just mind your own business and don't get involved in the bullshit. People do learn respect generally. If not, it's only a matter of time. Gangs are prevalent but they are generally more respectful. Though there really is no need to join. Now, once you leave the transfer after 2 years, you'll go to a real unit. It's a bit more serious there, but all in all, the time in transfer should have made you comfortable in prison already. There's more gayness though, prison punks, which does take some getting used to. Before 2004 and before safe prisons and transfer units, it was like the movies I hear. Though some units are still rock and roll, it's a lot less. Most don't check solos, people who aren't riding, but the rock and roll units do still. So once you get there you'll have to fight one guy about your size. If you're trying to get down you have to fight 2 for your core check, heart check if you're white. I'm Mexican. I was lucky so I didn't have to do this though because I was only in minimum security units though. In my mind, I was completely ready. Like others have said, it's mostly boring. Go to work. Come back to the dorm. Watch TV. Work out. Eat. Shower. Repeat. Just be aware. Do what you gotta do. Duck the TV. Watch your mouth. Mind your business. And you'll be alright. My dad said that he hates the fact that in those types of movies, people always got beat up. Some of the prisoners that my dad was with were actually pretty nice fellows. According to him, I stole, and I robbed, and I kidnapped the president's son, and held him for ransom. And I never got caught neither. The worst part about prison was the dementors. I know people who got jailed and in some prisons around here. Brassel, my friend. Things can be way more scary than in the movies. Believe me. Especially to the northern parts of the country where things get really wild. I recommend the movie Karandaru for a little taste of what is like. I just thought of another thing Hollywood gets wrong. When prisoners get visitation. Again, my experience was not actual prison but jail, so that may be the difference. A buddy of mine who still works there said now it's all done by video. The prisoner is in a room with a webcam and the visitor is in a completely separate room in the sheriff's office, outside the jail even. They can talk and see each other but it's just video. He said the video was some sheety 90s looking VHS quality too. Guess the county couldn't justify HD cameras for the prisoners. I've had a few friends who have been. The overriding opinion seems to be that's just very boring because there's simply not much to do. So long as you respect others and demand it back. Conflicts are rare.